They called it a curse, as if pain itself were unnatural, as if the rage of a man betrayed by the world should be exorcised, silenced, forgotten. But Dmitri was never cursed. He was revealed. In every age, the world creates a monster out of those it cannot control. The thinker, the fighter, the one who dares to scream, "I will not go quietly." And when they break that man, when they take everything from him, he becomes something else. Not a beast, a mirror. Dmitri is that mirror. Not the story of a werewolf, but the birth of the Alpha Prime. A being who no longer asks the world for permission to exist. If you've ever been made to feel small, if you've ever buried your fire to make others comfortable, then listen carefully, because this story might be about you. The king's ambition. The pages of history tell us of kings and rulers, of plagues, famines, and wars. They speak of empires rising and falling, of heroes and villains, and of the relentless march of time. But some events are too terrifying, too dangerous to be recorded for future generations. Hidden away, erased from the annals of history, lies the tale of the dawn of the werewolf, where the lichen curse enveloped the lands. A curse so potent, it was stricken from memory to prevent its recreation. In the heart of medieval Europe, a new kin arose, his name whispered with reverence and fear across the continent. King Cedric, a man of iron will and unparalleled ambition, sought to unite the fractured kingdoms under a single banner, his banner. From the lush valleys of the south to the frozen north, Cedric's armies marched, conquering all who stood in their path. His dream of a united realm drove him, and one by one the kingdoms fell, bending the knee to the relentless force of his vision. But there was one territory that remained unconquered, a land not registered on any map, known only in hushed tones as the Dark Lands. Legends spoke of this place as a realm of nightmares, a cursed domain where no man who entered ever returned. It lay between Cedric's newly acquired kingdoms, a dark blot on his otherwise pristine map of conquests. To truly unite his empire, Cedric needed the Dark Lands. In the dimly lit war room of his grand castle, Cedric stood, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. A massive table lay before them, a detailed map of the continent spread across its surface. Cedric's eyes were fixed on the uncharted territory, his expression one of determination and curiosity. "My lord," began Alistair, the oldest and wisest of Cedric's advisors, "we must speak plainly about the Dark Lands. They are not like any other territory we have encountered. The stories..." "Stories," Cedric interrupted, his voice commanding and impatient. "Superstitions and myths meant to scare children. We are men of reason, not frightened villagers." Alistair bowed his head slightly, choosing his words carefully. "Sire, the tales of the Dark Lands have persisted for centuries. They speak of wolves that walk on 2 feet, creatures of immense strength and ferocity. These lichens, as they are called, cannot be killed by mortal men. Those who have ventured into their realm have never returned." The room fell silent, the weight of Alistair's words hanging in the air. Cedric's gaze did not waver. "I have faced countless foes and emerged victorious. I will not be deterred by ghost stories. The Dark Lands are the key to uniting my kingdom, and I will march into them myself if I must." The advisors exchanged uneasy glances. They knew their king's resolve was unbreakable, but the Dark Lands were a different matter entirely. "Sire," another advisor, Sir Gregory, spoke up. "If you are determined to march on the Dark Lands, we must prepare with utmost caution. We should gather all the knowledge we can about these lichens and their weaknesses, if they have any." Cedric nodded, his decision made. "Then let it be so. We march at dawn." We will conquer the Dark Lands and bring them under our banner, no matter what monsters lurk within. As the advisors dispersed to make the necessary preparations, Cedric remained, staring at the uncharted territory on the map. A chill ran down his spine, but he dismissed it as the thrill of impending conquest. He had faced death and danger before, and emerged victorious. This would be no different. The first light of dawn saw Cedric's army assembled and ready. The king, clad in gleaming armor and astride a powerful steed, led his men towards the ominous horizon. The Dark Lands awaited, a shadowy realm of legend and fear, soon to be illuminated by the fiery ambition of a king determined to unite the world under his rule. As the army marched forward, the winds whispered through the trees, carrying with them the ancient secrets of the Dark Lands. Cedric, undeterred, pressed on, his heart steeled against the unknown. Little did he know, the true test of his reign was about to begin, and the curse of Lysanor awaited him, ready to change his destiny forever. King Cedric stood at the front of his army, his eyes fixed on the dense dark fog that enveloped the Dark Lands. His advisors, faces pale with worry, approached him tentatively. "Sire," Alistair began, his voice trembling with urgency, "we beg you to reconsider. Allow us to set up camp at the edge of the Dark Lands and send in the elite troops to clear a path first. It would be folly to march the entire army into such peril without knowing what awaits." Cedric's gaze remained unyielding. "We must move forward. The land must be ours." "Please, my lord," Sir Gregory implored. "The risk is too great. Our elite knights, the Order of the Iron Wolf, have never lost in battle. Let them forge the way." Cedric paused, considering their words. His desire to conquer was fierce, but the wisdom of his advisors held weight. With a reluctant nod, he agreed. "Very well. We shall make camp here. Send in the Iron Wolves." The camp was swiftly erected at the edge of the Dark Lands. Cedric watched as the Order of the Iron Wolf, a group of seasoned warriors known for their bravery and unmatched skill, prepared for their mission. Clad in gleaming armor and bearing the emblem of the wolf, they marched resolutely into the dark, foggy woods. Hours turned into a day, and then another. No word came from the knights. Anxiety grew among the soldiers, and even Cedric's resolve began to waver. Suddenly, a commotion stirred at the edge of the woods. Out of the darkness, what was left of the Iron Wolves came charging, battered and bloodied. Half of their ranks had been lost. One of the knights, Sir Roland, stumbled forward, his face ashen and eyes wide with horror. Cedric and his council gathered around him. "Speak, Sir Roland! What happened in there?" Cedric demanded. "Sire," Sir Roland panted, "we encountered creatures. Wolves that walk on two legs, hundreds of them. Their ferocity was unmatched, their power unnatural. It was as if they had the devil himself on their side." Cedric's expression darkened. "How many of our knights were lost?" "Half, my lord," Roland replied, his voice breaking. "And how many of these wolf creatures did you kill?" Roland hesitated, his face stricken with despair. "None, sire. They cannot be killed. I managed to stab several, but it had no effect. They are unstoppable." As the last of the knights retreated from the woods, Cedric began to don his armor, a determined fire in his eyes. "I will face them myself." "No, sire," Alistair objected. "We cannot lose you to these beasts. Your life is too valuable." Just then, a strange figure emerged from the woods. Half man, half wolf, the creature stood tall and imposing. "I wish to speak with the king," it growled. The council moved to block his path, but Cedric stepped forward, bravery shining through his frustration. "I am King Cedric. Speak." "I am Darian," the wolfman introduced himself. "We simply wish to be left in peace. Should you enter our lands again, I will not be as merciful. I will kill all who enter. You are a brave king, but you are powerless here. Leave us in peace, and no one else needs to die." Cedric's anger flared at this apparent challenge to his power. "I will take this land for my kingdom. It is a scar on these lands and must be healed. I, King Cedric, swear it." Darian's eyes flashed with a mix of sadness and warning. "Then you sentence your armies to death." With those words, Darian turned and disappeared back into the woods, leaving King Cedric seething with frustration and rage. The dark fog of the Dark Lands seemed to mock him, its depths hiding the terror that had claimed his knights and threatened his ambitions. Cedric knew then that his conquest would not be as simple as he had imagined. The true test of his reign had begun, and it was a battle against forces beyond his understanding. Days had passed since the disastrous foray into the Dark Lands, and King Cedric's mood had only darkened. Back in his kingdom, he stormed through the corridors of his castle, his rage a tempest that none could escape. His staff trembled under his wrath, and his generals and advisors bore the brunt of his ire. "We are but insects to these creatures," Cedric bellowed during a council meeting, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "They cannot be killed. To send in our armies is to send them to certain death. I am a king without the power to rule my lands." Days turned into weeks, and Cedric's anger only grew more volatile. He shouted at his servants, belittled his generals, and dismissed the advice of his most trusted counselors. The defeat at the hands of the Lycans gnawed at his pride, a wound that refused to heal. Then one evening, news of a strange visitor reached the castle. The man claimed to possess knowledge on how to defeat the Lycans and sought an audience with the king. Desperate for any advantage, Cedric ordered an immediate meeting. Night had fallen when Cedric took his place on the throne, his patience worn thin. The doors to the great hall creaked open, and a figure stepped inside, his presence shadowy and unsettling. The stranger approached, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "I am Thorn, a healer of sorts," the man began, his voice calm and measured. "I know many secrets of the Lycan, in particular, how to defeat them." Cedric leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me, man, before I have you strung up." Thorn smiled faintly, unperturbed by the king's threat. Now, that's no way to speak to someone who can help. Now is it? I will tell you, but I wish something in return." Cedric's eyes burned with impatience. "Name it." Thorn produced a crude map from his cloak and spread it on the floor, pointing to a small, insignificant piece of territory. "This," he said, "it is not in the way of any of your trade routes and would not be missed from the map. Nothing happens there." Cedric's advisors shifted uneasily, exchanging wary glances. Alistair, his voice filled with concern, spoke up. "Sire, we should consider this carefully. We know nothing of this man or his intentions." But Cedric, consumed by his need to defeat the Lycans, dismissed their concerns with a wave of his hand. "I will hear what he has to say." Thorn continued, "I simply wish a small piece of land for me and my people to live in peace and be left alone." The discomfort among the advisors was palpable, but Cedric's mind was made up. He could not afford to pass up any chance, no matter how small, to gain an advantage over the Lycans. "Agreed," Cedric said, his voice resolute. "You shall have your land. Now tell me, how do we defeat the Lycans?" A sly smile spread across Thorn's face as he began to share his knowledge, the dim light casting long shadows on the walls. The pact was sealed, and with it, a new chapter in Cedric's quest to conquer the Dark Lands began. As the night deepened, whispers of the deal echoed through the castle. Cedric's advisors could not shake the feeling of unease that lingered long after Thorn had left. Yet Cedric, driven by his burning need for victory, felt a glimmer of hope rekindle within him. The battle against the Lycans was far from over, and he would stop at nothing to see it through to the end. King Cedric's command resounded throughout the entire kingdom. Create weapons and armor of silver. The order was clear and unwavering. Every blacksmith, from the smallest village forge to the grand workshops of the capital, was instructed to halt all other work and focus solely on producing silver weaponry and armor. Every ounce of silver, from the coins in people's homes to the ornamental trinkets in noble estates, was seized for the king's cause. Foragers scoured the forests, mountains, and riverbeds, gathering materials for the smelting of silver. An entire kingdom was galvanized into a single purpose: to arm itself against the Lycan threat. Weeks turned into months as the fires of the forges burned day and night, their glow illuminating the relentless effort of the blacksmiths. The air was filled with the rhythmic clanging of hammers, the hiss of molten metal, and the acrid smell of smoke. At long last, the fruit of their labor was revealed. Swords, arrows, spears, and armor for men and horses, all forged from silver, gleamed under the sun. The weaponry was magnificent, a testament to the kingdom's unity and determination. Each knight, soldier, and warrior was issued silver arms. The metals shine a symbol of hope and resolve. King Cedric stood on a balcony overlooking the grand courtyard where his army had assembled. The sight of thousands of warriors clad in silver was awe-inspiring. The sun's rays reflected off their armor and weapons, creating a dazzling spectacle. Cedric's heart swelled with pride and anticipation. "With these weapons," Cedric declared to his advisors, who stood by his side, "we shall defeat the Lycan once and for all." His advisors nodded, their expressions a mix of hope and trepidation. The memory of their last encounter with the Lycans lingered, but the sight of the silver-armored army filled them with a renewed sense of possibility. The call to march was given, and the silver army moved out, a shimmering tide of determination and courage. Cedric led the way, his own armor gleaming, his silver sword at his side. The ground trembled under the weight of the marching soldiers, the sound of their unified steps echoing through the land. As they approached the edge of the Darklands, the once intimidating fog seemed less ominous in the face of their newfound strength. Cedric's eyes were fixed on the horizon, his mind set on the battle to come. He was determined to conquer the Darklands and vanquish the Lycan threat that had plagued his kingdom. The Silver Army marched on, their hearts steeled by Cedric's unwavering resolve. The Darklands awaited, but this time Cedric and his men were prepared. The battle between man and Lycan was about to resume, and with their silver weaponry, they hoped to turn the tide in their favor. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a silvery glow on the marching army, King Cedric allowed himself a rare smile. The future of his kingdom hinged on the success of this campaign, and he would stop at nothing to see it through. The silver army of King Cedric stood poised at the edge of the Darklands, the fog swirling ominously before them. Cedric raised his hand, signaling for silence. He surveyed his troops, their silver armor gleaming in the dim light. With a voice that carried strength and determination, he addressed his soldiers. "Brave warriors of the realm," Cedric began, his voice resonating with authority. "Today, we stand on the brink of a new era. Beyond these woods lies a land shrouded in darkness and fear. but we are not here to cower before it. We are here to conquer it, to bring light where there is shadow, to bring peace where there is chaos. Remember, it is not just our weapons that make us strong, but our courage, our unity, and our unwavering resolve. Today, we fight not just for land, but for the future of our kingdom. Forward, my brothers, into the dark lands. A resounding cheer erupted from the army, their spirits lifted by Cedric's words. With a determined stride, Cedric led his troops into the fog, the dense woods closing in around them. The march was arduous, the forest thick and foreboding. Every step seemed to echo with the whispers of ancient legends. Then, as they reached a clearing, they came face to face with a formidable sight. A large group of lichen warriors stood before them, their eyes glowing with feral intensity. The creatures were terrifying, their hulking forms a testament to their deadly prowess. Without hesitation, Cedric raised his sword and shouted, "Charge!" The silver weapons hit their mark, decimating the lichen army. Arrows flew and swords slashed, each strike causing the lichens immense pain. The lichens, who managed to avoid the initial barrage, found themselves helpless against the onslaught of silver. The battle was brutal but one-sided, and Cedric's army emerged victorious with very few casualties. Cedric's eyes burned with a bloodlust, his mind focused on a single purpose: destroy the lichen. No mercy, no quarter, no retreat. He ordered his army to move deeper into the woods, cutting down any lichen that crossed their path. The army of silver marched through the dark lands like a wave of death, leaving none spared. Finally, they arrived at the main outpost of the lichens, a den-like structure, more primal than any castle. As they approached, a familiar figure emerged under a white flag. Darian, the half-man, half-wolf. Darian's eyes were filled with sorrow and defiance as he spoke. You have slaughtered my people for land. All we asked was for peace. For hundreds of years we have never left the lands of Lizanor, keeping our people in peace. Your greed has forced you to slaughter us like cattle, using ancient knowledge of our weaknesses. Why would you do this if you are a king of peace? Cedric's expression remained stern as he replied, "A king must conquer to bring peace." Darian's gaze pierced Cedric's soul. "How did you know of our weakness?" Cedric answered, "A healer by the name of Thorn has aided our cause. He is a hero to our kingdom and these lands." Darian's eyes widened with realization. "You have been misled. The one you call Thorn is an elder, a vampire, parasitic and evil. Lichens live in peace for one purpose: to keep the elders in check. What you have done here today has doomed your kingdom. For once we are gone, the elders will go unchallenged, taking anything they want. There are no secret weapons to kill them. Only the lichen can do that, and you have removed us from this task. I wish you well, King Cedric, but you have doomed your people and your kingdoms. Your only hope is to pray to Lizanor that he may aid you." Cedric, angered and believing Darian to be lying, ordered his knights, "Kill him and any survivors." With a swift execution, Darian and the remaining lichens were slain. The Dark Lands were conquered, and Cedric's army emerged victorious. Days later, the kingdoms celebrated their triumph. Huge parties and festivities broke out across the nation as the lands were united under Cedric's rule. Laughter and music filled the air, and the people praised their king for his strength and leadership. But as the celebrations continued, an uneasy feeling lingered in Cedric's heart. The words of Darian echoed in his mind, a nagging doubt that refused to be silenced. Cedric stood alone on his balcony, looking out over his jubilant kingdom, wondering if the cost of victory had been too high. On a small, secluded piece of land at the edge of Cedric's kingdom, a group of elders, ancient and powerful vampires, made their way to the new lands, invited by the mysterious healer, Thorn. Though Thorn had now vanished, the land was dark and foreboding, as if cursed by his very presence. Thorn had left clear instructions for the elders. Wait until Cedric defeats the Lycans, then take the kingdom. The elders waited patiently, building small hideouts to retreat to during the daytime. Barely a few weeks had passed when troubling reports began to reach Cedric's ears. People in the kingdom were falling ill, weakened with small puncture marks on their necks. Many had died, their bodies mysteriously disappearing, while each day more and more were reported missing or sick. Cedric's advisors reminded him of Darian's ominous words. One advisor spoke gravely, "If these are the creatures Darian spoke of, none of our weapons will work. We will be helpless." Days passed, and the situation worsened. The number of missing and sick increased from all corners of the kingdom. Cedric's once mighty army was dwindling, knights and soldiers succumbing to the strange illness or vanishing without a trace. Each morning, the kingdom awoke to the horrors of vampirism, a plague draining the life out of the realm. The elders' sightings swarmed in each day, like a parasitic spectre drinking the kingdom's blood. A darkness descended over the kingdom. Cedric, in his castle, damned himself for falling for healer Thorn's trick. The words of Darian echoed in his mind. "Your only hope is to pray to Lissano, that he may aid you." Determined to save his people, Cedric jumped astride his horse and sped off towards the Dark Lands. No one had entered these lands since they were conquered. He galloped through the woods to the heart of the Dark Lands, where a shrine adorned with strange symbols awaited. Cedric dismounted and fell to his knees before the shrine. "Lissano, I have been misled by my pride and by another. Please aid me. I will give you my life, my soul, for the safety of my people." A strange, half-man, half-wolf creature approached Cedric. Cedric looked up, his heart pounding. "Darian!" The creature shook his head. "No, I use this image, as my true form would be too much for a mortal. I am Lissano, god of the Lycan. You slaughtered my people out of greed. Why would I help you?" Cedric's voice trembled with desperation. "I have lost everything I fought for. I was wrong. Me, not my people. Take my life and save my people." Lysano, guised as Darian, stepped closer and scratched Cedric's arm. Blood trickled down, but the wound healed unusually fast. "Now you bear the curse of the Lycan. When the moon is next full, you will become one of my children forever. Each person you spread your curse to will also become one of my children. When your job is done, you will return to the Dark Lands forever." Cedric felt a strange power coursing through his veins, a mingling of fear and hope. He knew his fate was sealed, but he had one purpose now: to save his people, no matter the cost. The chapter ended with Cedric standing at the heart of the Dark Lands, transformed and determined, the weight of his choices heavy on his shoulders. The fate of his kingdom now rested in the hands of the god he had once defied. Cedric returned to his castle, only to find it barren and desolate. The eerie silence was broken only by the sound of the wind whistling through the empty halls. No living soul could be seen. His heart sank with the weight of his failure and the devastation that had befallen his kingdom. But then, a single thought pierced through his despair. His son, born some months ago and kept hidden from the world, his son was the last hope for his lineage. Without wasting a moment, Cedric sped towards a small shack, hidden away from the castle and any prying eyes. It was a place known only to a few select and trusted friends. As he approached, his heart pounded with both fear and hope. Bursting through the door Cedric found his loyal friend, Sir Alistair, standing guard. In his arms, wrapped in a simple blanket, was Cedric's infant son. The relief that washed over Cedric was overwhelming. "Alistair," Cedric said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have done well." Alistair nodded, his expression a mix of concern and loyalty. "What is your command, my king?" Cedric reached into his cloak and pulled out a heavy purse of gold. "Take this gold. Leave the kingdom. Take my son to safety, far from here. Tell no one of his father or his lineage. Swear to me you will protect him." Alistair's eyes widened in understanding and resolve. "I swear it, my king. Your son will be safe." Cedric handed his son to Alistair, his heart breaking at the thought of parting with his only child. "He is the future. Ensure he lives free of this curse, free from the shadows of our past." Alistair took the child, his grip firm and protective. "I will guard him with my life." With a final, heartfelt look, Alistair turned and sped off into the distance, the weight of his new responsibility clear in his determined stride. Cedric watched them go, his heart heavy yet hopeful. He knew his friend would fulfill his promise. As the shack's door closed behind them, Cedric turned back towards the castle, the burden of his destiny pressing heavily upon him. He had given his all for his people, and now for his son. The fate of the kingdom may have been sealed, but the future of his bloodline was now in safe hands. Alone once more, Cedric steeled himself for the battles ahead. His transformation was inevitable, and with it came a new purpose. The kingdom needed to be cleansed of the vampire plague, and he would be the one to do it. Lisanano's curse was both his punishment and his redemption. As he walked back through the empty halls of his castle, Cedric knew he would fight with every ounce of his newfound strength, for his son, for his people, and for the hope that one day peace would return to the land. The night of the full moon had arrived. As the luminous orb rose high in the night sky, Cedric's body began to convulse. He cried out in pain as his form twisted and contorted, bones cracking and reshaping. His transformation from king to werewolf was excruciating but inevitable. When the change was complete, he stood on two legs, a fearsome beast, and let out a primal howl that echoed through the land. With supernatural speed, Cedric ran towards the lands of the elders, alone but determined. As he traveled through small settlements, he saw the elders attacking his people. Without hesitation, he dispatched the vampire invaders, his new lichened strength overwhelming them. After each encounter, he bit the remaining settlers, transforming them into lichens, his army growing with each passing hour. Throughout the night, Cedric's ranks swelled. By the time they reached the lands of the elders, they were a formidable force. The territory was dark and terrifying, a place where life itself seemed drained. The very air was heavy with malevolence. Like wild animals, Cedric and his lichens tore through the safe houses of the elders. The vampires, once confident in their dominion, found themselves powerless against the lichen onslaught. The purpose of the lichen was clear: to keep the elders in check, and Cedric executed this task with meticulous precision. They destroyed hundreds of elders, their screams piercing the night. Many fled in fear, never to be seen again. The battle raged on, a relentless purge of the parasitic vampires that had plagued the kingdom. As dawn approached, the lands of the elders were littered with the remnants of the night's destruction. Cedric had either killed or banished all of the elders. The morning sun rose, casting light on the devastation, but Cedric did not change back to his human form. He was now doomed to the lichen curse forever. Cedric led the remaining lichens back to the Dark Lands, where they were greeted by Lisanor, now in his full, godly form. Lisanor's presence was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "You sought to conquer this land. Lysanor spoke, his voice resonating with power. "But you have been its destroyer. You sought to bring peace, but have brought nothing but suffering and pain. You sought to save your people in a last bid for salvation, but you have now doomed them to the curse of the lichen. Your name will be removed from history, so no one will ever follow in your stead." As Lysanor's words echoed in the air, the lands began to regrow. Nature reclaimed what had been lost, and society slowly recovered and bloomed, without the interference of those who sought peace through conquest. King Cedric, once a mighty ruler, was forgotten, his deeds and his name erased from history, a silent testament to the cost of pride and ambition. As the world moved on, the Darklands remained a place of balance, a reminder of the thin line between power and ruin. Cedric, now a creature of the night, led his lichens into the depths of the Darklands, a ghost of the past, destined to guard the balance he once sought to destroy. The legacy of Cedric. Cedric's son grew up far from the shadow of his father's deeds, living a peaceful and happy life. The small, hidden village where he was raised became his sanctuary. As the years passed, his lineage continued, each generation living in blissful ignorance of their heritage, free from the curse that had once threatened their bloodline. Generations came and went, and the descendants of King Cedric spread across Europe. Their lives were marked by prosperity and happiness, untouched by the darkness that had plagued their ancestor. By the 1600s, one of Cedric's descendants, a man named Alexander, lived a contented life in Eastern Europe. Alexander was a humble farmer, known for his kindness and dedication to his family. He lived with his wife Katerina and their newborn son in a quaint village nestled in the Carpathian mountains. The night of his son's birth was a joyous occasion. As Katerina held the baby in her arms, she noticed a peculiar mark on his small back, a pentagon, the mark of the wolf. She brushed it off as a strange birthmark, something unique and insignificant. Life continued in peaceful contentment. The villagers admired Alexander's family, unaware of the ancient lineage and the curse that lay dormant within the newborn child. One evening, as the moon rose high in the sky, Alexander sat by the fireplace, his son cradled in his arms. The light of the flames danced across the room, casting shadows that seemed to whisper of forgotten secrets. Katerina looked on with a smile, the love for her family evident in her eyes, but the mark on the child's back was no mere coincidence. The curse of Cedric had been biding its time, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The number of descendants since Cedric, the cycles of the moon, and the alignment of ancient prophecies all culminated in this very child. As the firelight flickered, Alexander noticed something strange. His son's eyes, which had been a bright blue, were now a deep, unnatural red. Small, elongated teeth began to show through the baby's gums, sharp and foreboding. Katerina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. "Alexander, his eyes!" Alexander held his son closer, a chill running down his spine. The child, now squirming in his arms, let out a small growl, a sound that no human infant should make. The prophecy had come to fruition. The lichen curse had been reborn, hidden within the lineage of King Cedric. The erased history and forgotten legacy had led to this moment, the curse emerging once more after centuries of dormancy. Alexander and Katerina had no knowledge of the ancient curse, their lineage, or the dark past that had been stricken from history. They were innocent victims, caught in the resurgence of a centuries-old malediction. As the realization dawned on them, the fire flickered, casting a brief image of a wolf's shadow on the wall. The curse had found its way back into the world, ready to unfold its dark legacy once again. The child, with his red eyes and sharp teeth, signaled the beginning of a new chapter in the saga. The day of the werewolf was coming, and the world would soon face the resurgence of the ancient curse, reborn in the unsuspecting lineage of a forgotten king. The story of King Cedric and his descendants was far from over. The legacy of the Lycan would continue, bringing with it the promise of darkness and the hope of redemption. You were told that sacrifice was noble, that to give and give until nothing remains is the highest virtue, but Dmitri refused. When offered peace, he chose clarity. When offered sanctuary, he chose truth, that the world punishes strength until it fears it, and so he stopped asking to be understood. The Alpha Prime did not inherit his power, he forged it in the crucible of fire, abandonment, and betrayal. Every werewolf that bites carries not a curse, but an echo of a man who became what the world feared most, a being who needed nothing, who followed no creed, a man who became his own law. Day of the Werewolf. 10 years had passed since the birth of Alexander and Katerina's son, Dmitri. The strange mark of the wolf, a pentagon, had remained on his back, and his red eyes and elongated teeth became more pronounced as he grew older. To protect him from the world's judgment and to shield the world from the curse, Alexander and Katerina kept Dmitri hidden, away from the prying eyes of the villagers. Dmitri lived a secluded life, playing alone in the woods surrounding their home. The forest became his sanctuary, a place where he could explore without fear of being seen. But the curse of the Lycan was growing stronger within him. As Dmitri aged, the power of the curse intensified, stirring something wild and uncontrollable deep inside him. One crisp autumn afternoon, Dmitri was playing in the woods, pretending to be a great explorer. The leaves crunched beneath his feet, and the cool breeze rustled through the trees. He was lost in his imagination when he heard voices behind him. Turning, he saw a group of boys from the village, their faces twisted with curiosity and malice. "Look, it's the freak," one of the boys sneered. "Yeah, the weird kid who never comes to town," another chimed in. Dmitri's heart pounded in his chest. He tried to ignore them and continue his game, but the boys closed in, surrounding him. They were older and much bigger than the 10-year-old Dmitri. Their taunts turned into shoves, and soon they were pushing him to the ground. "Why are you hiding out here, freak?" one boy demanded, pinning Dmitri down and hitting him. Just as Dmitri felt overwhelmed by fear and pain, a low growl echoed through the woods. The boys paused, looking around nervously. From the shadows of the trees, a lone wolf emerged, its eyes fixed on the bullies. The boys froze in terror as another wolf appeared, and then another, until a pack of wild wolves stood behind Dmitri, growling menacingly. Dmitri, bloodied and battered, slowly stood up. The wolves did not threaten him. Instead, they seemed to protect him. He turned to face the boys, his red eyes blazing with a fierce, otherworldly light. The boys' faces drained of color as they realized they were outmatched. They scrambled to their feet and fled, screaming in fear. Once they were gone, Dmitri sank to the ground, his body shaking with a mix of pain and relief. The wolves approached him cautiously, their demeanor softening. They licked his wounds tenderly, their presence offering comfort and solace. Dmitri realized that the curse inside him connected him to these creatures. They were his kin, bound by the same ancient power that flowed through his veins. He sat among them, feeling a strange sense of belonging. For the first time, he understood that he was not alone in his struggle. The curse of the lichen was both a burden and a bond, linking him to the wild and untamed spirit of the wolves. As Dmitri sat there, surrounded by his newfound pack, he knew that his life would never be ordinary. The power within him was growing, and with it came a destiny he could not yet comprehend. But for now, in the heart of the forest, he found a moment of peace amidst the chaos of his existence. The witch hunt. But news of the strange boy spread quickly through the village. The bullies who had tormented Dmitri exaggerated their encounter, claiming he spoke with wolves and the devil himself. Whispers and rumors began to circulate, casting a dark shadow over Alexander and Katerina's family. The villagers, already fearful and superstitious, blamed their failing crops and misfortunes on the isolated family in the woods. "They're witches," one villager whispered, "in league with the devil." "I heard they curse anyone who crosses their path," another added. "They must be behind the sickness that's spreading," a third villager claimed. The local church took notice of the growing hysteria. The priest, Father Gregory, saw an opportunity to reaffirm his authority and cleanse the village of perceived evil. He rallied the villagers, and together they agreed to put the family on trial as witches. A rough mob, armed with torches and crude weapons, gathered in the village square. Father Gregory led them, his voice filled with righteous fury. "We must rid ourselves of this evil. The family in the woods must be brought to justice." The mob marched towards the isolated shack, their shouts and cries echoing through the forest. "Witches! Devils! Bring them out!" Alexander and Katerina heard the mob long before they saw the flickering torches. Katerina clutched Alexander's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "What shall we do, Alexander? They will not listen to reason." Alexander's face was grim. "We must send Dmitri away, and fast." They grabbed Dmitri, who was bewildered and frightened. "You must leave, Dmitri," Alexander said urgently. "Run deep into the forest and do not look back." Tears streamed down Dmitri's face. "But why, Father? Why must I go?" Alexander hugged him tightly. "To keep you safe, my son. Now go." With a heavy heart, Dmitri turned and fled into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. The mob arrived at the shack, their anger palpable. Father Gregory stood at the front, his eyes cold and accusing. "Come out and face your judgment," he shouted. Alexander and Katerina stepped outside, standing resolutely before the mob. "We have done nothing wrong," Alexander pleaded. "We simply want to live in peace." "Liar," a man in the crowd yelled. "You worship the devil. Your son is evil. Where is he?" "He is not here," Alexander replied, his voice firm. The mob surged forward, pushing Alexander to the ground. He tried to fight back, but there were too many of them. Katerina rushed to his side, but she was also pushed down. Rocks and stones began to rain down on the couple, striking their heads and bodies. Alexander collapsed under the onslaught, and Katerina soon followed. The frenzy of the mob escalated, driven by bloodlust. "She's a witch," a man screamed. "She avoids the rocks." The villagers turned to clubs and sticks, beating Alexander and Katerina mercilessly. The couple lay motionless, the life beaten out of them. Silence fell over the clearing, the air heavy with the aftermath of violence. Even the birds had stopped singing. A man in the mob pointed and shouted, "There's the little devil!" Dmitri emerged from the thick woods, his eyes wide with shock and horror as he took in the scene before him. His parents lay dead, their bodies broken and bloodied. The mob, still lusting for blood, turned their attention to him. But Dmitri was not alone. From the shadows of the forest, wolves emerged, dozens of them. They formed a protective circle around Dmitri, their growls low and menacing. With a trembling hand, Dmitri raised his arm and pointed at the mob. The wolves charged, their primal instincts unleashed. The villagers screamed and scattered, but many were caught by the wild pack, their cries of terror filling the night. The chapter ended with the mob fleeing in fear, Dmitri standing amidst the chaos, his heart filled with a mixture of grief and vengeance. The wolves, his new family, licked his wounds and surrounded him protectively. The curse of the lichen had revealed its terrible power, and Dmitri's journey had only just begun. The path of rage. Dmitri sat amidst the ruins of his burnt-out home, tears streaming down his face. The family he knew and the world he loved were gone, reduced to ashes and memories. His sobs echoed through the empty shell of the house, a poignant reminder of the life that had been brutally taken from him. As he wept, Dmitri heard the crunch of leaves underfoot, signaling the approach of someone or something. He sprang to his feet, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger, expecting the villagers to have returned. Instead, a strange figure emerged from the shadows, a being that was neither fully man nor beast. It had the features of both, a powerful and otherworldly presence. Dmitri's eyes widened as he took in the sight. "Who are you?" Dmitri demanded, his voice tinged with defiance. "I am Lysanor," the creature replied, his voice calm and resonant. "I am a friend. Now that you are alone, I am here to help you." Dmitri screamed, "I don't need your help. I don't need anyone. You are all mean and horrible. I want my mother and father back." Lysanor's expression softened with sorrow. "That is beyond even my power, my child. But I have sent you a new family. The wolves that protected you are a part of your pack, just as you are a part of mine. Come, child, we must not dwell in this land any longer. There is a place we can go, a place of peace, where we shall not be disturbed by humans." Dmitri spat his reply. "No, they all need to pay. They need to suffer for what they did, and I will make them suffer." Lysanor looked on with a mixture of pity and understanding. "Your rage is admirable, but this path will only lead to more pain. Let it go, my child. The rage does nothing but bring more pain." But Dmitri, consumed by his anger and grief, could not hear Lysanor's wisdom. He turned and ran off into the woods, his heart heavy with the weight of his loss. The wolves, sensing his turmoil, followed him into the shadows. Alone and scared, a 10-year-old boy with primal rage and wolves at his command, Dmitri's journey had taken a dark and uncertain turn. The forest swallowed him up, leaving the burnt remains of his past behind. His future was now a path of vengeance, driven by the pain of his parents' death and the injustice he felt. The rage within him simmered, waiting to be unleashed upon those who had wronged him. As Dmitri disappeared into the depths of the forest, Lysanor stood silently, watching the boy's retreating form. The god of the lichen knew that Dmitri's path would be fraught with danger and suffering, but it was a path the boy had chosen. All Lysanor could do now was hope that in time, Dmitri would find his way back to the light. The chapter ended with Dmitri, a lost and angry child, running deeper into the unknown, his heart set on revenge. The wolves followed, a silent testament to the ancient bond that now linked them. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Dmitri's resolve was unshakable. The day of the werewolf was approaching, and Dmitri's fate was yet to be written. The return of humanity. Almost 10 years had passed since the boy who talked to wolves disappeared into the depths of the forest. The villagers who once knew Dmitri spoke of him only in hushed whispers, his existence reduced to myth and legend. Many who heard the tale laughed, dismissing it as a story to scare children at night. The woods where the wolves roamed were now considered cursed, and none dared to venture into their dark embrace. Dmitri, now a grown man, had lived with the wolves in the shadowy depths of the forest for years. His once youthful innocence had hardened into a steely resolve, and he had become one with the wilderness. The wolves were his family, and the forest was his home. One late night, as the moon hung high in the sky, Dmitri heard a commotion. Screams piercing the stillness of the night. He sped towards the sound, his instinct sharp. As he neared, he saw a young woman being chased by a group of young men. "Witch! Witch!" they shouted, their voices filled with venom. The men caught up to her, knocking her to the ground and pinning her down. "We'll teach you a lesson, witch," they sneered. The woman screamed, "Help me, please." Dmitri hid in the trees, watching the scene unfold. His heart pounded with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Without revealing himself, he commanded the wolves to help. They emerged from the shadows, growling deeply at the men. The men screamed in terror and ran off, shouting, "Leave her to the wolves." The wolves surrounded the woman, but did not attack. They stared at her, their eyes filled with a strange, almost human curiosity. Then they parted, allowing Dmitri to step through. He approached the woman and asked, "Are you okay?" She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Yes." "But the wolves?" Dmitri replied, "They will not harm you." The woman, still trembling, introduced herself. "My name is Elena. Thank you for saving me." As Dmitri began to walk off, Elena called out, "Please, I have nowhere to go. If I return home, they will surely kill me." Dmitri hesitated, then waved for her to follow. They walked in silence through the dark woods, the wolves vanishing into the shadows. Eventually, they came upon Dmitri's home, a small cave modestly furnished with blankets and a fire pit. Dmitri sat down and asked, "Are you hungry?" Elena nodded. Dmitri grabbed a dead rabbit and took a bite, then handed it to her. She recoiled in disgust. "You can't eat that raw. It must be cooked." She built up the fire and cooked the rabbit, the warmth of the flames casting flickering shadows on the cave walls. They ate together, the silence between them slowly giving way to conversation. Time passed, and Elena stayed with Dmitri in the forest. She taught him how to cook, to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Her presence brought a sense of humanity back into his life that he had long forgotten. They shared stories, laughed, and slowly a bond formed between them. Dmitri found himself opening up to Elena, his guarded heart slowly melting in her presence. She brought light to his darkness, showing him that there was more to life than vengeance and survival. As the days turned into weeks and then months, their relationship deepened. Elena's kindness and resilience helped Dmitri rediscover his own humanity. He began to see the world not just as a place of danger and suffering, but as a place where love and happiness could exist. Their love blossomed slowly, like a flower blooming in the harshest of conditions. Dmitri found solace in Elena's embrace, and Elena found strength in Dmitri's unwavering presence. Together, they forged a new life, one built on mutual respect and affection. The forest, once a place of solitude and darkness, became a sanctuary of love and hope. Dmitri and Elena's bond grew stronger with each passing day, their love a testament to the power of resilience and the healing force of companionship. In the heart of the forest, amidst the wolves and the shadows, Dmitri and Elena found a new beginning. Their love story was one of redemption and transformation, a journey from darkness into light. The Awakening of the Beast A year had passed since Elena and Dmitri found solace in each other's arms. For the first time in many years, they experienced peace and love. Elena felt safe, far from those who would call her a witch, and Dmitri had found companionship and warmth in her presence. They lived a simple life in the heart of the forest, a world away from the cruelty of mankind. One bright morning, Elena set out to search for herbs and mushrooms. She ventured further than usual, her mind occupied with thoughts of a special meal she wanted to prepare for Dmitri. As she bent down to pick a mushroom, a shadow loomed over her. "And who might you be?" a gruff voice asked. Startled, Elena looked up to see a burly man standing over her. Panic surged through her, and she bolted in the opposite direction, only to be blocked by another man. Two more hunters emerged from the trees, their eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "We're looking for wolves," one of them said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Seems some have been attacking the village's sheep. Wouldn't have seen any wolves, would you?" "No," Elena replied, her voice trembling. Back at the cave, Dmitri waited for Elena's return. As the hours stretched into another day, a sense of foreboding gnawed at him. By the second evening, he knew something was terribly wrong. He set out to search for her, his heart heavy with dread. For hours, Dmitri scoured the forest, calling out her name. The woods offered no answers, only a chilling silence. Then, an inexplicable sense of urgency gripped him, and he raced through the trees, driven by a force he could not understand. He reached the outskirts of the forest, where a group of wolves stood in a circle, their heads lowered. Dmitri's heart pounded as he approached, fearing the worst. There, on the ground, bloodied and lifeless, lay Elena. Her body bore the marks of savage beatings and unspeakable abuse. Dmitri dropped to his knees, his world shattered. The primal rage that had once been soothed by Elena's love surged back with a vengeance, this time 100-fold. His vision blurred with tears of fury as he looked up to the sky, where the full moon hung ominously. A guttural roar erupted from his throat. A sound of pure agony and wrath. His body began to convulse, muscles straining and bones cracking. His skin rippled and tore as thick fur sprouted. His hands twisted into massive claws, and his face elongated into a snarling snout. Pain seared through him, but it was drowned out by the overpowering rage that consumed his soul. Every part of him transformed, his senses sharpened, his strength magnified. His once human eyes now glowed with a feral intensity, and his heartbeat thundered like a drum. Dmitri was no longer a man. He had become a beast, a werewolf driven by hatred and the need for retribution. As the transformation completed, Dmitri stood on two powerful legs, a monstrous figure of fury and grief. The wolves around him howled in unison, echoing his pain and anger. Dmitri's mind was a tempest of vengeance. The hunters who had done this to Elena would pay, and the village that harbored such cruelty would face his wrath. His primal rage was ready to be unleashed, and he would stop at nothing to make them suffer as he had suffered. With a final, earth-shaking roar, Dmitri sprinted towards the village, his thoughts consumed by the promise of retribution. The beast within him had awoken, and there would be no mercy for those who had taken everything from him. The chapter ended with Dmitri, now a fearsome werewolf, charging through the forest towards the village. His heart, once filled with love, was now a vessel of unquenchable rage, ready to unleash a storm of vengeance upon those who had wronged him. The Night of Rage. Dmitri stood at the edge of the village, the full moon casting an eerie glow over the darkened rooftops. Shadows danced in the moonlight, and the village lay in an uneasy silence, unaware of the storm about to descend upon it. The beast within Dmitri howled for vengeance, its primal rage bubbling just beneath the surface. With a low growl, Dmitri stepped forward, his massive form slipping into the village streets. The first screams erupted as he tore into anyone in his path. His claws slashed through flesh, his teeth sank into bone. The villagers, caught off guard, could do nothing but run in terror. Dmitri's vengeance knew no bounds. He moved with terrifying speed, his strength unmatched. He smashed through doors, dragging people from their homes. Their pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears. Each attack fueled his rage, the memory of Elena's lifeless body driving him further into madness. He was a whirlwind of death and destruction, his roars echoing through the night. Bodies littered the streets, the scent of blood thick in the air. Fires started in the chaos, casting a hellish glow over the village. The cries of the dying mixed with the roar of the flames, creating a symphony of horror. Amidst the carnage, Dmitri's eyes locked onto a familiar figure, standing in the center of the village square. Father Gregory, the priest who had led the mob to his parents' home, stood holding a cross aloft. His face was pale, his hands trembling, but he stood his ground. "Demon, begone in the name of the Lord!" Father Gregory shouted, his voice wavering. For a moment, a flicker of recognition flashed in Dmitri's eyes. Memories of his childhood, of the night his parents were murdered, surged to the forefront of his mind. The beast within him roared louder, drowning out any semblance of humanity. With a savage snarl, Dmitri lunged at Father Gregory. His claws tore through the priest's robes, ripping into flesh. Father Gregory screamed, dropping the cross as he fell to the ground, blood pooling around him. Dmitri's rage was unstoppable. The night wore on, and Dmitri's rampage continued. He moved through the village like a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless. The villagers had no chance against his wrath. By the time the moon began to set, the village lay in ruins. Homes were destroyed, bodies lay strewn about, and the fires continued to burn, consuming what was left. The once peaceful village was now a landscape of death and destruction. Dmitri stood in the center of the chaos, his breath heavy and ragged. The primal rage within him slowly began to ebb, replaced by an overwhelming sense of emptiness. As dawn approached, Dmitri, still in his beast form, looked around at the devastation he had wrought. The silence was deafening, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. The beast within had been satisfied, but at a cost too great to bear. The chapter ended with Dmitri standing alone amidst the ruins, the first light of day casting a pale glow over the scene of horror. His vengeance had been fulfilled, but the price of his rage was the complete annihilation of the village and any remnants of his humanity. The night of pure terror and rage had ended, leaving only destruction in its wake. The rise of the Alpha. As Dmitri stood amidst the smouldering ruins of the village, a familiar figure approached him, seemingly emerging from nowhere. Lysanor, in the form of a half-man, half-beast, stepped into the clearing, his eyes filled with sorrowful wisdom. "I tried to warn you, my son," Lysanor spoke gently. "There is no peace outside of my sanctuary. Come, it's time for you to come home." Dmitri's eyes, still glowing with the remnants of his primal rage, locked onto Lysanor. "No," he growled. "Though my vengeance is sated today, it knows no limits. I must unleash the rage again and again. The primal rage cannot be confined to peace. I will make them all suffer." Lysanor shook his head, his expression one of deep sadness. "The path of rage and hatred will only lead to more pain, my child. Nothing in this world can ease your suffering. Vengeance will always leave you wanting." "But it will make me feel so much better," Dmitri retorted, his voice a low snarl. For the remainder of the day, Dmitri stood alone in the center of the village, still in his werewolf form, now his permanent state. Lysanor watched him for a moment longer, then turned to leave, his final words hanging in the air. "You are now the Alpha, Dmitri. Your rage will know no bounds, and so the beast will inherit the earth." As night fell, Dmitri, the Alpha, let out a primal roar that echoed through the night. Something terrifying began to happen. The bodies of those who had been cut down by the Alpha started to convulse. Their once lifeless forms twisted and changed, transforming into werewolves, each one a part of the Alpha's growing pack. Dmitri watched as the newly transformed werewolves rose to their feet, their eyes glowing with the same feral intensity that burned within him. The village was no longer a place of desolation, but the birthplace of a new terror. The Alpha, once known as Dmitri, stood at the forefront, a legion of werewolves behind him. Their collective growls and howls filled the night air, a symphony of primal rage and newfound purpose. With his pack at his back, Dmitri knew that his path of vengeance had only just begun. The world would soon know the wrath of the Alpha and his relentless horde. No corner of the earth would be safe from their terror. The beast would indeed inherit the earth, and Dmitri, now fully embracing his role as the Alpha, was ready to lead the charge. The chapter ended with Dmitri, the Alpha, and his pack of werewolves poised on the edge of the village, ready to unleash their terror upon the world. The primal rage within him burned brighter than ever, a force that would stop at nothing to make all who crossed his path suffer as he had suffered. The vision of the apocalypse. The world had changed forever. Under the reign of the Alpha, the once vibrant cities and peaceful villages lay in ruins. The skies were perpetually darkened by thick clouds, casting an eternal twilight over the desolate landscape. Buildings crumbled, streets overgrown with wild vegetation, and the remnants of human civilization lay scattered and broken. The silence was broken only by the howls of the werewolves that roamed the earth, an unstoppable force that had brought about the end of humanity. The apocalypse had come, and the beast had inherited the earth. No human was left alive. The entire race had been hunted to extinction. The werewolves ruled supreme, their primal instincts driving them to dominate every corner of the world. The transformation was complete, and the earth was now a domain of relentless predators, a twisted reflection of the once diverse and thriving planet. Amidst the chaos, Dmitri, the Alpha, stood atop a hill, overlooking the apocalyptic wasteland. His eyes, glowing with the feral intensity of the beast within, surveyed the world he had helped create. The vision of his vengeance fulfilled was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. The primal rage that had driven him to this point had reshaped the world into a nightmare where only the strong survived. But then, the scene shifted. The dark clouds began to dissipate, and the ruins of the world blurred into the shadows of Dmitri's mind. This apocalyptic vision was not the present, but a possible future, one where his rage and hatred had led to the complete annihilation of humanity. Snapping back to reality, Dmitri found himself and his pack on the outskirts of a bustling city. The humans within were still unaware of the terror approaching their gates. The night was calm, the full moon casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The vision of the future lingered in Dmitri's mind. His desire for vengeance remained, but so did the weight of Lysanor's words. The path of rage and hatred would lead to more pain, but it was the only path he knew. With a final guttural growl, Dmitri led his pack forward. The werewolves, driven by their Alpha's unrelenting will, moved as one towards the city. Their eyes gleamed with the promise of destruction, their primal instincts ready to be unleashed upon the unsuspecting inhabitants. As they marched, the howl of the Alpha echoed through the night, a harbinger of the terror to come. The city lay ahead, a beacon of human civilization, soon to be engulfed by the tide of the beast. Part 2 of this saga ended with Dmitri and his pack poised on the brink of another assault, their presence a dark omen for the world. The primal rage within the Alpha had been rekindled, and the future he had envisioned loomed ever closer. The march towards the city signaled the beginning of a new chapter in the story of the Alpha and his pack, a story of vengeance, destruction, and the relentless pursuit of dominance in a world forever changed by the beast. Night of the Werewolf. Chapter 1. The Siege of Brasov. The Alpha, Dmitri, stood outside the towering walls of the 17th century city of Brasov. Nestled in the Carpathian mountains, the city was a bustling hub of trade and culture, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the lycanthropic menace lurking just beyond their gates. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape, highlighting Dmitri's massive form and the army of werewolves that stood behind him, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. Inside Brasov, the townsfolk went about their daily duties, oblivious to the impending doom. Merchants bartered in the marketplace, children played in the cobblestone streets, and the scent of fresh bread wafted from the bakeries. The city was alive with the hum of activity, a stark contrast to the silence and tension outside its walls. Dmitri raised his clawed hand, signaling his pack. With a guttural growl, he commanded the werewolves to attack. They surged forward as one, a terrifying tide of fur and fangs. The gates of Brasov, strong and fortified, stood no chance against their relentless onslaught. The wolves breached the defenses with ease, pouring into the city like a flood of death. The peaceful streets of Brasov erupted into chaos. The werewolves tore through the populace, their primal rage driving them to slaughter anyone in their path. Screams of terror filled the air as men, women and children fell before the oncoming horde. Dmitri moved with deadly precision, his claws and teeth cutting down all who dared stand against him. Those who were bitten by the werewolves soon joined the carnage, their bodies convulsing and transforming into beasts. Dmitri's ranks swelled with each new transformation, his army growing stronger with every bite. The newly turned werewolves, driven by the same insatiable hunger for destruction, turned on their former friends and family, furthering the devastation. For hours the bloodbath continued. Buildings were set ablaze, and the once vibrant city was reduced to ruins. The marketplace, once filled with laughter and commerce, became a battlefield of death and despair. The churches, which had stood as sanctuaries of hope, were now tombs of the fallen. Dmitri, the Alpha, surveyed the destruction with a cold, unyielding gaze. His vengeance had transformed Brasov into a graveyard. The city's defenders lay dead, its walls breached, and its citizens either slaughtered or turned into werewolves. The conquest was complete. As the first light of dawn approached, Dmitri stood amidst the ruins of Brasov, his army of werewolves surrounding him. The night of terror had ended, But the reign of the Alpha was far from over. The once great city was now a testament to his power and the unrelenting fury of his pack. The chapter ended with Dmitri, the Alpha, and his ever-growing legion of werewolves poised for their next move. The world had changed, and the beast within Dmitri knew no bounds. The night of the werewolf had only just begun, and humanity's darkest fears were about to become a reality. The call to arms. In the heart of Central Europe, nestled along the Danube River, lay the grand city of Vienna. It was the largest and most influential city near the Carpathian Mountains, a beacon of culture and power in the region. Ruling over Vienna was Archduke Leopold Graham, a man known for his wisdom, strength, and unwavering sense of justice. As the most powerful ruler in Central Europe, his influence stretched far and wide. Word of the Lycan curse and the fall of Brasov reached Archduke Graham swiftly. Refugees poured into Vienna, seeking safety under his rule. Despite the chaos, Graham remained composed. He was a kind ruler, but stern in his governance. He accepted the refugees, offering them sanctuary, but immediately put them to work rebuilding and fortifying the city. In the Grand Council chamber, Graham convened a meeting with his trusted advisors, military leaders, and survivors from the afflicted regions. The room was filled with a palpable tension as they discussed the growing threat of the werewolves. "These creatures are unlike any enemy we have faced before," began General von Richter, a seasoned warrior. "They are relentless and unstoppable. Every person they bite becomes one of them." A survivor, his face gaunt and eyes haunted, spoke up. "I barely escaped Brasov with my life. They tore through the city like a force of nature. There was nothing we could do." Graham listened intently, his face grave. "Is there no way to defeat them?" he asked, his voice calm, but edged with concern. An older advisor, Albrecht, shook his head. "We have tried conventional weapons. They are ineffective. The curse spreads with each bite, turning our own people against us. It is a plague unlike any other." Silence fell over the room as the gravity of the situation settled upon them. Graham's mind raced with possibilities. He was a ruler who believed in facing challenges head-on, but this threat was unlike any he had encountered. "Archduke," spoke up Lady Helena, a scholar well-versed in ancient lore. "There may be legends and old knowledge that speak of ways to combat such creatures. Perhaps in the ancient texts and forgotten histories, we can find a clue." Graham nodded thoughtfully. "Then we must leave no stone unturned. Search the archives, consult the oldest scholars, and gather any information that may help us. We will not sit idly by while our people are slaughtered." As the council dispersed to carry out his orders, Graham remained seated, deep in thought. The Lycan threat was more than just a physical danger. It was a test of his leadership and resolve. He knew that the fate of not just Vienna, but potentially all of Central Europe, rested on his shoulders. The refugees continued to stream into the city, and Graham ensured that their needs were met while maintaining order and security. He could see the fear in their eyes, and it strengthened his determination to protect his people. That evening, Graham stood on the balcony of his palace, overlooking the bustling city below. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, but he was resolute. He would find a way to defeat the Lycans, no matter the cost. In the distance, the Carpathian Mountains loomed, a silent reminder of the darkness that had been unleashed. Graham knew that time was of the essence, and every moment spent was a step closer to the inevitable confrontation with the Alpha and his pack. As Archduke Graham pondered his next move, his mind a whirlwind of strategies and possibilities. The battle against the lichen curse had begun, and he was determined to lead his people through the storm that lay ahead. The fall of hope. The news was grim. Villages, towns and cities across the Carpathian region were falling one by one to the Alpha and his werewolf army. The peaceful hamlets were the first to be consumed, their residents turning into feral beasts under the relentless onslaught. Larger towns, thinking their fortified walls would protect them, quickly realized their folly as the werewolves breached their defenses with terrifying ease. The once thriving marketplaces and bustling streets became graveyards, littered with the remnants of human civilization. In the city of Vienna, the atmosphere was tense and filled with dread. Word had spread that the Alpha was making his way towards them, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. The people of Vienna worked tirelessly, building barricades and arming themselves, but the sense of hopelessness was palpable. Fear was etched into every face, and whispers of doom permeated the air. "They're unstoppable," a blacksmith muttered as he hammered out makeshift weapons. "What chance do we have against those monsters?" "We're all going to die," a woman whispered to her friend as they reinforced the barricades. "They say the werewolves can't be killed." The children clung to their mothers, eyes wide with terror, sensing the fear of the adults. The city was a cauldron of despair, and even the bravest hearts were gripped by the certainty of their fate. In the midst of this chaos, Archduke Leopold Graham remained steadfast. He knew that surrendering to fear would only hasten their demise. He convened a council with his most trusted advisors and the refugees who had seen the horror firsthand. "We must find a way to fight back," Graham said, his voice resolute. "We cannot succumb to despair." Lady Helena, the scholar who had been tirelessly researching ancient texts, spoke up. "There is a place, once called the Darklands, where the lichens were said to dwell. It is far beyond the Carpathian mountains. Traveling there would take weeks, if not months, on horseback." Graham's brow furrowed. "We don't have that kind of time." Helena nodded, her expression serious. "I know, but I found something else. An old scroll with strange markings. It mentions a deity, Lysano, the god of the lichen. These symbols, I believe we can recreate them and try something. I know not what, but it's something." She unrolled the ancient parchment, revealing intricate symbols and glyphs that seemed to pulse with a forgotten power. "These symbols might hold the key. If we can invoke Lysano, perhaps we can find a way to counter the Alpha and his curse." Graham studied the scroll, the weight of their last hope resting on the fragile paper. He looked up at Helena, his eyes filled with determination. "I would rather try something than fall to my knees and give up." The people of Vienna, though afraid, watched as their leaders worked with a sense of purpose. The scroll was carefully studied, and a ritual was planned. Symbols were painstakingly recreated, and preparations were made to invoke the ancient deity. As the night approached, the feeling of helplessness began to shift. It was not replaced with certainty or confidence, but with a flicker of hope. Graham's resolve inspired those around him, and even in the face of almost certain doom, they found the strength to carry on. The chapter ended with Vienna on the brink of attack, the Alpha and his werewolves drawing ever closer. The people braced for the inevitable, their fate resting in the hands of their determined leader and the ancient symbols that might just hold the key to their survival. The ritual of desperation. The Alpha and his relentless army stood at the outskirts of Vienna. Fires blazed, and the air was thick with smoke and the scent of blood. The once thriving outskirts were now a battlefield, as the werewolves tore through anything and anyone in their path, an unstoppable force of primal fury. From his balcony, Archduke Leopold Graham could see the fires and hear the distant, agonizing screams of his people. His heart pounded with urgency. "Whatever this ritual is, we need to do it now," he commanded, his voice echoing through the halls of his stronghold. Inside the main chamber, Lady Helena worked feverishly, putting the final touches on the ancient symbols and preparing for the invocation of Lysanor. Her hands trembled with both fear and determination as she arranged the relics and chanted the incantations. The scroll lay open before her, its symbols glowing faintly in the dim light. Outside, the Lycan army marched through the streets of Vienna, an unstoppable wave of terror. The Alpha, Dmitri, led them with an iron will, his power growing with each new werewolf that joined his ranks. The primal rage within him surged, fueled by the strength of his pack. The city's defenses crumbled. People fled in terror, only to be caught and turned by the advancing werewolves. The power of the pack enhanced Dmitri's rage, making him more formidable with every passing moment. Graham could see the Lycan army at the gates of his stronghold. "Hurry, Helena!" he screamed, his voice filled with desperation. Helena mumbled the final words of the ritual, her voice barely audible over the chaos outside. She closed her eyes, focusing all her energy on the invocation. Moments passed, each one feeling like an eternity, but nothing seemed to happen. Graham looked at her, his expression a mix of hope and despair. "Well, we never gave up. We'd go out trying." The sounds of battle grew closer. They could hear the guards being slaughtered just outside the chamber. The doors shook with the force of the werewolves' attacks, the wood splintering and cracking under the assault. Graham drew his sword, standing tall and ready to defend his people to the last breath. Helena, tears streaming down her face, stood beside him, clutching the scroll. The final scene was one of impending doom. The gates of the stronghold began to buckle under the pressure, and the roar of the Alpha's army grew louder, an unrelenting storm of primal rage. The chapter ended with Graham and Helena standing side by side, prepared to face their fate. The sense of impending doom hung heavy in the air as the might of the Alpha and his werewolf army bore down upon them, and the last hope of Vienna seemed to flicker and fade in the encroaching darkness. The bargain with Lysanor. As the doors buckled and shattered under the immense power of the werewolves, time seemed to slow. The savage howls of the werewolves faded, and the bloodlust in their eyes dimmed. Everything around Archduke Leopold Graham froze in place. The werewolves stood motionless, their claws suspended mid-air. Helena, still clutching the ancient scroll, remained as still as a statue. Graham looked around, bewildered by the sudden stillness. His grip on his sword tightened. "What sorcery is this?" he muttered. From the shadows, a strange figure emerged, half man, half beast. The figure exuded an otherworldly presence, its eyes glowing with an ancient wisdom. Graham raised his sword defensively. "Are you the Alpha?" The figure shook its head. "No, I am Lysanor. I use this form as your mortal mind would not be able to handle my true essence." Lysanor's voice echoed through the chamber, calm and powerful. "Come, we shall return here shortly." In an instant, Graham found himself transported to a distant past. Before him stretched a battlefield where a silver-clad army marched through the dark lands, slaughtering the Lycans with ruthless efficiency. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the cries of the dying. Lysanor stood beside Graham, surveying the scene. This is where it began, all those years ago, with King Cedric. He was a ruler, like you, driven by the desire to save his people at any cost. Graham watched as the scene unfolded. He saw Cedric, a fierce warrior, leading his army against the Lycans. The battle was brutal, and the Lycans were decimated. King Cedric, Lysanor continued, in his desperation, offered me anything to save his people. And so, the curse you see before you is his anything. The curse of the Lycan began with his pact. Graham turned to Lysanor, his eyes filled with a mix of awe and horror. What would you have me do to save my people? Lysanor's gaze bore into Graham's soul. Tell me, Graham, what would you give to save your people? Graham's voice was steady. Anything. I would give my life, my power. Lysanor's laugh was deep and resonant. What is a life? Many thousands of lives have already been taken. Do you think because you are a ruler, yours is worth more than anyone else's? It is not. And what power do you have to give when your cities have been conquered? Graham's resolve did not waver. I'll give my soul. Lysanor shook his head, a wry smile playing on his lips. Now then, let's not have any of that. Everyone's first offer is always their soul. It's such a cheap thing. I'll give my soul for wealth, for power, for love. What if I were to ask you to keep your soul forever? Graham's brow furrowed. I do not understand. Of course you do not, Lysanor replied. You are but a human, a mortal, but the deal is simple. In exchange for the safety of your people, you will keep your soul bound to this earth, bound to me. You will become part of the very curse you seek to end. Graham hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. We have a deal then. Lysanor's eyes gleamed with a knowing light. Yes, said Graham, his voice firm despite the uncertainty in his heart. The chapter ended with the sense of impending doom, and the weight of Lysanor's bargain hanging heavily in the air. The fate of Vienna, and perhaps the world, now hinged on the cryptic terms of a deal with an ancient deity. The true cost of Graham's sacrifice remained shrouded in mystery, leaving an unsettling uncertainty about what lay ahead. The end of carnage. In the blink of an eye, Graham was back at his stronghold. The werewolves, his friends, and even Lady Helena were still frozen in time. Lysanor stood before him, his otherworldly presence casting a surreal glow over the room. Lysanor's voice broke the silence. Now, before we finish the details of this deal, let me end this carnage. With a wave of Lysanor's hand, time resumed. The werewolves and everyone else unfroze, the battle cries and sounds of destruction returning momentarily before Graham could react. He raised his sword, prepared to defend against the werewolves, but to his astonishment, the werewolves stopped their attack. They turned and began to walk away, still in their wolf form. Hundreds, thousands of werewolves marched westward, heading towards an unknown destination. Graham watched in disbelief. Where are they going? He asked, his voice filled with cautious hope. Home, Lysanor replied simply. The god of the Lycan watched the retreating werewolves with a somber expression. Now, before we seal this bargain, there is one more I need to speak with. He may well save you or condemn you. Let's find out. With that, Lysanor vanished, leaving Graham standing amidst the confusion. Helena raced to Graham, her eyes wide with relief and disbelief. You did it. You saved us. Graham smiled faintly, but his mind was heavy with the knowledge that more was yet to come. The werewolves' retreat had given them a reprieve, but the true cost of the bargain was still unknown. As the villagers and soldiers slowly emerged from their hiding places, unsure of what had transpired, Graham could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had bought them time, but at what price? The chapter ended with Graham standing amidst the aftermath, his heart filled with a mix of relief and foreboding. The promise of Lysanor's bargain lingered in the air, a dark cloud over their temporary peace. Graham knew that his journey was far from over, and the true test of his leadership and sacrifice was yet to be revealed. The Alpha's choice. The Alpha roared in anger as his pack no longer followed his commands. The werewolves marched out of the city, heading towards the dark lands. Dmitri's fury was palpable, his eyes burning with uncontained rage. In a flash, Lysanor appeared before him, exuding calm amidst the chaos. "Come, my child. It is time for you to decide," Lysanor said, his voice filled with both authority and sadness. In the blink of an eye, Lysanor and Dmitri stood at the ruins of Dmitri's childhood home. The familiar surroundings were now nothing more than a shell of their former selves. Dmitri looked down, realizing he was in his human form once more. "My son," Lysanor began, "you have known much sorrow. I beg you to come home to me. Join your pack in the Darklands. Complete the cycle. Become one with my pack. If you stay here in this world, there is nothing but pain and suffering for you. You are the Alpha, the primal force that cannot die. You will live a long, painful life of suffering and regret until those born of death shall give you peace." Dmitri's eyes flashed with defiance. "They took everything from me," he spat. "They took my parents for no reason other than ignorance. They killed my Elena for no reason other than lust. How many more will they kill? No, I will not know peace. I will die from those born of death." Lysanor's face fell into a deep sadness. "As you wish, my child. I feel I have failed you. Even with all my power, I cannot stop your suffering, though I am known as a god. Today, I feel as feeble as an ant. I shall mourn for many years because of this." Dmitri stood silently, his heart a cauldron of pain and vengeance. "But I do wish you well, my son," Lysanor continued, a faint glimmer of hope in his voice. "And though you are destined to die, I see fragments of an alternative, where you are happy, with an offspring." The words hung in the air, filled with a possibility Dmitri had never considered. The idea of a future, of a lineage, seemed impossible amidst his wrath and sorrow. "I cannot see that future," Dmitri replied, his voice breaking. "Perhaps not now," Lysanor said gently, "but know that the possibility exists. It is a choice you may yet make, in time." With that, Lysanor vanished, leaving Dmitri alone in the ruins of his past. The silence was deafening, the weight of his decision settling heavily upon him. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness and uncertainty, but Dmitri knew one thing: his vengeance was not yet complete. The chapter ended with Dmitri standing amidst the remnants of his childhood home, the echoes of Lysanor's words resonating within him. The choice between a life of endless suffering and the faint glimmer of a different future lay before him, waiting for his next move. The Alpha's journey was far from over, and the world would soon feel the full force of his unrelenting wrath. The Eternal Guardian. Graham was whisked away from his stronghold, transported to an unknown piece of land. Before him stood a small, unassuming house, surrounded by dense woods. He stood alone, confusion and unease gripping him. Moments later, Lysanor appeared, his presence both comforting and ominous. "I had hoped to save you from this," Lysanor began, his voice tinged with regret. "But a deal is a deal." Graham listened intently, his heart heavy with anticipation. "From this day on, you shall be the keeper," Lysanor continued. "Your sons and daughters will be the keepers. The lineage of your family will keep watch over the beast. You shall never be allowed to leave this place. Others will come so you may continue your lineage. This will be for many years. Your pact to keep your soul means that you and your descendants will never leave this place. You shall be the eternal guardian to keep the beast in check. The beast cannot be killed. For how do you kill primal nature? One day, many years from today, you will have paid your bargain, and you and your line will be free. But until this time, you must stay forever watchful, forever vigilant, for if the beast ever escapes, nothing will stop him. Graham's mind raced, trying to comprehend the magnitude of his new reality. The weight of eternal guardianship settled heavily upon his shoulders. Suddenly, a mighty roar echoed from the cellar beneath the house. Graham's heart pounded as he descended the stairs, the sound growing louder and more ferocious. He reached a reinforced door, thick and unyielding, and peered through a small barred window. Inside the Alpha, Dmitri stood in his werewolf form. His eyes burned with unquenchable rage, his body tense with primal energy. Dmitri's fury was palpable, a force of nature confined within the stone walls of the cellar. Graham felt a mixture of pity and resolve. He understood the necessity of his role, the importance of his lineage in keeping the world safe from Dmitri's unrestrained wrath. The words of Lysanor echoed in his mind, forever watchful, forever vigilant. The thought of never leaving this place, of his descendants bearing the same burden, filled Graham with a sense of sorrow. Yet he knew it was the price he had agreed to pay. As he turned to leave the cellar, he heard Dmitri's growl soften, a flicker of humanity glinting in his eyes for just a moment. Graham wondered if, in some distant reality, there might be a chance for Dmitri to find peace, to escape the cycle of rage and vengeance. Graham ascended the stairs, his mind set on the long road ahead. He stepped out into the small house, taking in the surroundings that would now be his eternal prison and his charge. The roar of the Alpha faded into the background, replaced by the solemn duty that lay before him. The chapter ended with Graham standing in the doorway of the house, the weight of his new role pressing down on him. He was now the guardian, the keeper of the beast. The future of his lineage was bound to this place, forever linked to the primal force contained below. The journey of the Alpha and the lineage of Graham had intertwined, setting the stage for an eternal struggle between vigilance and primal fury. The eternal vigil. Years passed, and Archduke Leopold Graham was long dead. His lineage took over the charge of the keepers, and their name became synonymous with their sacred duty, the Graham family. The land where the house stood became almost invisible to the outside world, shrouded in secrecy and protected by ancient wards. Few dared to disturb the Graham family, for their purpose was both revered and feared. Generations came and went, each Graham carrying the heavy burden of their ancestors' pact with Lysanor. The family home, now an imposing yet hidden mansion, stood as a silent sentinel over the beast confined in the cellar. Every few years, a lone wanderer, guided by destiny or the will of Lysanor, would arrive to join the family and continue the lineage. These followers of Lysanor ensured that the bloodline remained unbroken and the duty unfulfilled. Many more years passed, and the world outside changed dramatically. The mansion, however, remained untouched by time, a relic of a bygone era, almost forgotten by the outside world. One stormy night in the present day, a man named Tom found himself seeking shelter. The rain poured relentlessly, and the wind howled like a mournful spirit. Shivering and soaked to the bone, Tom trudged through the dark woods until he came upon the old mansion. Its silhouette loomed ominously against the lightning-lit sky. Desperate for refuge, Tom walked up to the massive wooden door and knocked. The sound echoed eerily, mingling with the roar of the storm. He waited, hoping for a kind soul to offer him shelter from the unforgiving elements. The door creaked open slightly, casting a sliver of warm light into the cold, wet darkness outside. Tom peered inside, wondering who or what awaited him beyond the threshold. Would he find solace and a place to rest? Or would he uncover the secrets and burdens of the Graham family? The legacy of the Alpha, the curse of the Lichen, and the eternal guardianship of the Graham family were stories waiting to be told. The chapter ended with Tom standing at the doorway, the possibilities of his fate hanging in the balance. His encounter with the Graham family and the hidden truths of their lineage would unfold in the Crimson Dawn series, available exclusively at Professor Shadow. The saga of the Alpha, the Keepers, and the Beast would continue, weaving a tale of duty, destiny, and the primal forces that shape the world. The end. The Keeper's Decision, a name to hide the curse. It was a cold, misty evening in the late 1800s when Edward Graham, one of the distant keepers of the Graham family, sat alone in the dimly lit study of the ancestral mansion. The ancient house had seen generations of Grahams come and go, each sworn to the eternal duty of keeping the alpha werewolf Dmitri locked away beneath its stone floors. Edward had been raised with the knowledge of the curse, the burden passed down through the family since the time of Archduke Leopold Graham. But tonight, as the winds howled outside and the fire crackled low in the hearth, Edward felt the weight of that burden more heavily than ever before. The family records lay open before him, filled with accounts of the terror Dmitri had wrought in his time, the villages destroyed, the lives lost, and the primal rage that had once threatened to consume the world. But what troubled Edward most were the older records, the ones that hinted at a connection between Dmitri and King Cedric, the ancient ruler whose pact with Lysano had begun the curse. There was talk among the family, whispers that Dmitri's true identity might someday be uncovered, linking the curse directly to King Cedric and his fateful deal. If such a connection were made public, the legacy of King Cedric would be discovered, and the horrors of the past and the dark legacy of the werewolf curse would be known. Edward knew what had to be done. The name Dmitri had to be erased, buried deep within the family's secret history. But how could he do it without raising suspicion? How could he alter the records without betraying the truth that only the keepers knew? His eyes fell on the family crest, emblazoned with the name Graham. A thought began to form in his mind, one that could protect the family and keep the curse hidden. What if the curse was no longer tied to Dmitri, the long-forgotten boy who had become the Alpha? What if, instead, it became part of the Graham family itself, a burden they had always carried? Edward took a deep breath, reaching for his pen. Slowly, he began to rewrite the records, changing the name of Dmitri to Duke Graham. The new name would become the official story, passed down through the generations. Duke Graham would be remembered as a powerful, cursed ancestor, whose rage and strength were kept in check by the family's vigilance. As Edward wrote, he could feel the tension ease from his shoulders. The link to King Cedric would be obscured, hidden behind the facade of a family curse that had always belonged to the Grahams. The truth would be buried, known only to the keepers, while the outside world would believe that Duke Graham was the origin of the curse, a dark chapter in the family's long history. When he was finished, Edward sealed the revised records and placed them in the family's vault, where they would remain hidden from prying eyes. The name Dmitri was erased, replaced by Duke Graham, and with it, the family's secret was secured. As he locked the vault, Edward whispered a silent prayer to Lysano, hoping that his decision would protect the Graham family from the horrors of the past. The curse was now theirs to bear, woven into their very name, a a shadow that would follow them through the ages. But deep below, in the darkened cellar, the Alpha waited. His name changed, but his rage undiminished, ever ready to be unleashed upon the world once more. The Graham bloodline still watches the cellar. They lock the door and pray the beast never rises. But let me ask you something. Can you lock away an idea? Can you bury what was born from truth? Dmitri, the Alpha Prime, is not just flesh and claw. He is the embodiment of something we pretend does not exist, the moral right to fight back. He is what happens when the world breaks a man, and the man rebuilds himself without apology. They fear him because he did not die. He became his own standard of value, and though his story ends, his question remains: if I was forged by the fire, why should I bow to the ones who lit it?